Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we'll be talking about the downfall of Hillsong, and specifically as it relates to its finances, but we'll also touch a little bit on its attendance and other factors going on. Now, a while ago, Evangelical Dark Web here predicted that Hillsong would collapse without Brian Houston at the helm. The argument that I made at the time was that Brian Houston was uniquely talented enough to weather the storm of scandals, or at least uniquely tyrannical enough to hold Hillsong together, because this guy's the Ray Kroc of pastors. And Hillsong is the McDonald's of churches. So far, my prediction that Brian Houston's exit would lead to the demise of Hillsong seems to be coming true. And we're specifically going to touch upon the financials as it relates to the decline of Hillsong. We have an article going up live at Evangelical Dark Web the same time as this video that will touch a little bit deeper on the finances than this video will. But we're going to get a little wonky as we discuss what is going on at Hillsong, at least today. Credit to Anthony, who's a member of Evangelical Dark Web, who wrote this article, and he titled it Hillsong Church Oceans Deep of Financial Impropriety, a nice little play on the Oceans song. And it's important to note that the numbers we will be talking about are Australian dollars, which has a 1.44 exchange rate to US dollars. It's a weaker currency. So just an FYI, and another thing to note is that Australian accounting standards do not follow the gap that America uses. And we're going to be comparing their 2021 to their 2020 numbers because the 2022 financials aren't out yet. So here we go. We have their income statement. As you can see, there's about a $10.8 million of revenue that's declined, which is a 12.34% decrease. And Hillsong, if you break down the revenue, they report that 77% of revenues in 2021 derive from donations, which is actually an increased proportion. It used to be 73%, now it's 77%, which could have to do with their decline in conferences. I'm not entirely sure, but that's an interesting fact. Despite the larger percentage of revenue from donors, this represents a $2.5 million decrease in donations. And the fact that they only lost $2.5 million following a year of shutdowns and scandals, shuttered churches, and obviously sex scandals is pretty big as well, is fairly telling that they are either efficient in replacing donors or they possess a loyal base of support. Some might even call that a very cultish level of support. Based on their history of financial disclosures, it will probably be a year before it is known whether this decrease escalated in 2022. There's a couple other detailed reports on their finances, but here we go into the financial impropriety, which is a pretty interesting allegation that has been brought up against Hillsong Church. I mean, we kind of all know it's true based off what's going on overseas and the lavish spending that their American counterparts were doing, but nonetheless, the Australian government, specifically the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, the ACNC, has launched an investigation into Hillsong's financial practices. This is then followed by a lawsuit by whistleblower Natalie Moses, a former Hillsong employee who has alleged a litany of accounting malpractices committed by Hillsong Church. Moses filed a lawsuit claiming that Hillsong violated whistleblower protections under Australian law. So here are some of the things that she has alleged. Dubious financial record keeping, the misappropriation of church finances, and claims that Hillsong leaders used tax-free money for large cash gifts to Hillsong founder Brian Houston and his family. She goes on to claim that Hillsong illegally hid its international transfers by making payments through its U.S.-based entities. The lump sum payments outgoing to Brian Houston is the major headline and latest scandal for Hillsong. So that's what's grabbing people's attention, is the fact that Hillsong is paying Brian Houston large sums of money. Yet the financials paint a picture that correlates with Moses' accusation. So that's what we're reporting on here. Here's a cash flow statement, and again, if you're not an accounting nerd, you might not realize that the cash flow is the lifeblood of a business. Like this is the best barometer of the health of a business, in my opinion, is the statement of cash flow, not the income statement, not necessarily a balance sheet, but the cash flow. This tells you how much life a business or entity has, and they actually decreased in cash year over, or no, they increased 8 point something million dollars, as we talked about earlier. So on their cash flow, they plainly state that they transfer millions of dollars between multiple Hillsong entities. The crux of Moses' allegation is that they launder tax-free money through Hillsong entities so they can misappropriate and conceal its use by transferring it abroad. The alleged flow of cash goes as follows. Money is donated to Hillsong Australia. Money is then transferred abroad to avoid domestic oversight. From there, payments are made from overseas entities to Brian Houston. Entities repay loans to Hillsong Corporate. Their mistrust is without borders. Another claim Moses made is that Hillsong Church received $9 million from their Hillsong Foundation, which is a separate entity, in order to cover a financial deficit. Another interesting note is that Hillsong labels their musicians as pastors in order to pay them tax-free, which is certainly supported by the fact that they have a $22 million payroll for pastors. So the court, that has yet to play out, but there is a demonstrable culture of Hillsong transferring millions of dollars between entities, marking them as loans and loan repayments. Such transference easily enables fraud and abuse, marking them as loan. And here's the other thing. We already know that Hillsong they have no scruples when it comes to very expensive high-end credit card bills. So let's talk a little bit about attendance at Hillsong. Hillsong is also rather vague in their attendance data, given that attendance the previous 2 years has been impacted by COVID. They intentionally obfuscate their attendance numbers. That's something critical to note. They obfuscate. Their 2020 report focuses predominantly on online reach, while their 2021 numbers combine online and in person. In combining all Australian provinces, they hosted an average attendance per week of 21,219 attendees, though it is it's not necessarily clear how much this is skewed. What is a median week, to avoid how data might be skewed from Christmas and Easter with all the Creasters out there. Another thing to note that is noted in this article is their Safe Church program, which was a necessary program implemented by Hillsong to respond to the issue of child abuse and to protect children. A pretty necessary program, you might say. However, the thing that's noted about this program is that this program was used to finance the End COVID for All campaign, which glorifies a poisonous jabs, which will not further be mentioned, as a solution to a global pandemic. So basically, if it's not Bill Gates wanting to experiment on certain medical practices, it's actually Brian Houston, apparently. So it is unsurprising that they would promote the jab and shill the government narrative on a people especially oppressed by their government during lockdowns. Because you got to remember, Australia had it pretty rough. They had it really rough during lockdowns. Uh, Make no mistake, Hillsong is pretty woke. They have a diversity, equity, and inclusion board designed to implement a racial reconciliation plan of action that focuses on building awareness, equipping leaders, and advancing representation and equity. Which, 10 years ago they were calling equality, but now they switched it to equity. And so many people have forgotten about that. But for an overwhelming white population that is Australia, Hillsong seeks to go diverse. The section states that we have been attentive to the conversations that deepen our understanding of racism and implicit bias. So here's the thing: whether in America or Australia, critical race theory and social justice are global ideologies within the Anglosphere. Like, it's not like it's here and not there. The primary difference and distinction that makes Hillsong stand out on the issue of wokeness is that they are woke like a Fortune 500 company and not a generic woke church. So here's the conclusion: Hillsong's best days are behind it, and the scandals are piling up. The walls are closing in. And the fact that they receive in excess of 70% of their revenue from willing donors despite scandals indicates a strong moat, which is a financial term. Doubtless, donors will continue throwing dollar after dollar into the fire to subsidize these scandals while Hillsong Church moves money between accounts to cover their tracks and portray legitimacy. There is much scrutiny for the tax exemption of churches that masquerade as charities that function as corporations on a global stage. Hillsong is by far the most egregious offender. So that concludes our look into the scandals of Hillsong. Don't forget to like the video, also subscribe to the channel as the least you can do. If you want to do more, Evangelical Dark Web has a Patreon-like system built into its website. You can support us for as little as $5 a month at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. Have a blessed day. Let me know what you think about what I think in the comment section below, and I will catch you on the next one.